I'm going to proceed with the next two speaker panelists for this afternoon's event. The first one is Dr. Henry Roman, and Henry works at the Department of Science and Innovation here in Pretoria in South Africa. He's going to be talking to us for 10 minutes on green economic stimulus options for the post-pandemic world. And in a moment, we should be able to see Henry in his slides. We can see Henry. That's a good start.
Thanks, Joe. I don't have any slides. I will only be I'll be speaking. So mine will be a little bit of a philosophical one combined with some practical things that the DSI can do in this green economic stimulus environment. The DSI, for those that don't know, is the National Department of Science and Innovation, previously the Department of Science and Technology. And our mandate is to undertake research, development and innovation in South Africa through various means. Amongst them is obviously human capital development, high-end skills, and promoting R&D both in our academic institutions, our science councils, as well as with private sector. Now, last week, the President Ramaphosa addressed a joint sitting of Parliament on South Africa's economic reconstruction and recovery plan. The objectives of this plan are to create jobs, and here he's looking primarily through aggressive infrastructure investment and mass employment schemes or programs. Amongst these, you could look at things where we, in the water sector, are looking at working for water as a program, potentially boosting a program like that, and to create mass employment in a post-COVID recovery. Also looking at reindustrializing our economy, focusing on growing small businesses. As we know, the SMME space is what you focus on when you want to grow the economy. Industrializing our economy also presents us that opportunity that Kevin outlined around becoming more efficient in our resource utilization. Accelerating economic reforms to unlock investment and growth, fighting crime and corruption, and improving the capability of the state. The capability of the state also includes how different government departments actually start working together to achieve those outcomes and those goals. Now, I'm not an economist, but it's pretty obvious to most that there's a lot of work to be done in stabilizing and growing our economy as well as the global economy, which has taken quite a severe knock in this time of COVID. And has taught us, in my view, has taught us a lot about what to do in future when the next pandemic comes. Not to do. The president also indicated that it will take an extraordinary effort to recover from the shock of this pandemic. As you know, the country was already in an economic decline before COVID hit us, and it just exacerbated what was already a pretty bad situation. However, when he was speaking, what I heard and what I took away is that there is actually an opportunity for us to disrupt what is the current regime, turn it around, because surely we can't do any worse damage to the global and local economies than has already been done through our linear economic approaches to how we grow our economies in different countries. Within this recovery plan, we're looking at secure energy supply. That's related to water as well. It's not independent of water. We must always remember everything is intertwined in some way. We're looking at more than 1 trillion rand in infrastructure investment over the next 4 years. That is a number I can't even comprehend, but there's an opportunity there, and I'll come back to that. But the one part that got my attention, and I quote, is it will be digital, green, and sustainable, and it will invest in our human capital to lay the foundations for the future, end quote. And that talks to me as an employee of the DSI. And I'll come back to the digital part, but green, sustainable, and human capital to lay the foundations for the future are the ingredients you need to build back better for a green and blue planet with some brown. You can't get away from the deserts that do exist. They have a role to play. But the disruption I spoke about that the system needs relates to the transition to a more circular economy, which keeps our resources in flow for as long as possible at their maximum value. It's also about being efficient in our use of those natural resources. Now, I already mentioned the SMEs, but government also has a role to play here in preferential procurement potentially. The means to drive the transition by procuring goods and services from companies that have circular economy at their core. There's also a role to play for multinational companies, because they can also increase the participation of local small businesses in their supply chains, and thereby they can stimulate job creation. But the options from DSI is, last year we had the new white paper on science, tech and innovation that was published and approved by Cabinet. And one of the tasks of our department is to coordinate the national system of innovation. Now, within this system of innovation, there are entities that report directly to our minister, the National Research Foundation, Technology Innovation Agency, and the Center for Scientific and Industrial Research. They all have different roles that they play within this innovation continuum. The NRF builds the capacities that we will need at the level of masters and PhDs. And now with our department being married to Department of Higher Education and Training, we have access to the CETAs as well for those other much needed technical roles that have to be put in place. TIA have a focus on water security in their new strategic plan, and the CSR, as I understand, is also in the process of establishing a water center. Now, there's opportunities that exist for partnership with these entities in the space, and TIA in particular has funding to assist with development aspects to get you closer to markets such as IP issues, etc. We also have NIPMO, the National Intellectual Property Management Office within the DSI, that is specifically mandated to look after intellectual property developed with public funding. We also have WADA. It's a partnership between the DSI and the WRC. This is to demonstrate innovative water tech, establish test beds with municipalities and water utilities. So you saw quite a lot of focus on water efficiency. It's interesting because I see that in the projects that come through for funding on the WADA platform as well. Big focus on water efficiency. There's over 30 technologies that have been tested, and they also have technology advisory notes for inbound technologies. So we're not excluding that which has been done elsewhere, if it's and appropriate to the South African conditions. NCPC spoke, they're also involved in water efficiency and energy efficiency. The last one I want to talk to is the R&D tax incentive, Section 11D of the Income Tax Act, to promote private sector R&D investment. The purpose behind this incentive is to encourage business to conduct scientific and technological research in South Africa to drive that culture for innovation. What this incentive allows, it allows you to get a 150% deduction of proven R&D expenditure when determining your taxable income. There's a process by which this happens. We're aiming for a 90-day turnaround on that process within the department, and it's available. It's been utilized quite extensively by lots of small players and bigger players as well. Then the digital part, which I wanted to come back to, is, like Kevin said, you cannot manage what you cannot measure or collect data on. So if we want to build back better and green, we need to invest in the digital future as well. And there I'm talking particularly to data science. It's very high on the skills requirements for many people, industries and countries. And we need an understanding of different systems, what happens within the systems, and what happens when the systems intersect with each other as well. Those sectors or systems at play within our space. And the complexity of the water, energy, food nexus needs the data that's collected to be translated to useful information, so decisions can be made. Just merely collecting reams of data is useless unless it tells somebody something that they can then act on. I just Something to think about is for this infrastructure bill, the 1 trillion enormous number, I think we should start thinking about materials for that infrastructure. For instance, pipes. Can the pipes contain like an RFID that transmits data in real time and then through machine learning can predict pipe bursts, enabling a technician somewhere to go and make those repairs before the water loss actually happens? Can we not rethink our wastewater treatment works and speak of them as water factories? This is a term I learned last year when in Denmark. So we don't only produce clean water from wastewater, but the value-added products and services we can also produce from that wastewater treatment works. Can we not improve the water efficiency in industry, but at households as well? So every person in the country has a role to play to conserve this resource. Because the transition to a circular economy is a whole of society approach. And the last one really relates back to what Tamar was speaking about. Brand owners can influence consumers to be more conscious of the right things to do. So understanding the problems we face and their complexity also calls for co-creation of solutions across government departments, with industry, with academia, and with society. We need to define the implementation parameters for each of these partners and trust that each one will do what they need to do. And in closing, I truly believe that South Africa has the different parts of the machine, but they're lying all over the place, like a dirty workshop. And what we need to do is to put those parts together and create the machine that will achieve the goals that the President has outlined. Thank you.
Henry, thank you so much. That was a fascinating and, for me, quite an inspiring set of information about what we can do and how we can seize the post-pandemic world and make it better than the old world. And for sure, there are things in the old world that I will not miss.